Hey guys, tonight we're going to dive into the truly wild and often utterly horrifying reality of Roman imperial assassinations. Imagine this, you're walking through the Forum, the marble gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, the scent of incense and hot bread in the air. You're rubbing shoulders with senators in their crisp togas, legionaries clanking in their armor, and merchants hawking their wares. But lurking beneath this veneer of grandeur, a chilling truth whispers through the crowd: the emperor, that godlike figure on the Palatine Hill, is just as vulnerable, if not more so, than any common citizen. In fact, you, dear listener, if you were somehow transported back to the height of the Roman Empire and found yourself wearing that purple toga, you'd probably not last very long. Your lifespan as an emperor would likely be shorter than the average reality TV show. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself, perhaps unexpectedly, thrust onto the very pinnacle of the Roman world. The Senate has just declared you emperor, or perhaps, more likely, your legions, sweaty and cheering, have hoisted you onto a shield, proclaiming you their new leader. Either way, you now wear the purple, the symbol of ultimate power. But as the cheers die down, and the heavy weight of the imperial mantle settles upon your shoulders, a cold, hard truth begins to dawn on you: this throne, gleaming with gold and ivory, is often stained with the dried blood of those who sat upon it before you. You are not just inheriting an empire, you are inheriting a chilling legacy of paranoia, betrayal, and sudden violent death. The horrifying reality of Roman imperial assassinations isn't some distant abstract concept, it's a constant, suffocating presence that defines your every waking moment. You move through your days, ostensibly the most powerful person in the known world, yet you are acutely aware that 1,000 eyes are watching you, and many of them belong to people who would see you dead for personal gain, for political ambition, or simply because they believe they could do a better job. Consider the sheer precariousness of your position. The Roman Empire, a vast, sprawling entity, is held together by force, yes, but also by the fragile threads of loyalty and tradition. And you, the emperor, are the central knot in that intricate tapestry. If that knot frays, the whole thing can unravel. Your life, your reign, your very existence hinges on maintaining that delicate balance. You start to see plots everywhere: the loyalties of your closest advisors, the smiles of your family members, the deference of your generals, all become suspect. Did that cupbearer just linger a moment too long? Is that senator's praise a little too effusive? The delicious food laid before you, prepared by the finest chefs in the known world, becomes a potential delivery system for poisons. The luxurious bathhouse, designed for relaxation, could be where an assassin's blade finds your unsuspecting back. Every shadow holds a potential threat, every whisper a possible conspiracy. This isn't just a job, it's a constant, high-stakes game of survival. The mechanics of power in Rome are incredibly complex, and you, as the new emperor, are immediately thrust into this viper's nest. There's the Senate, a body of old, powerful families who, while theoretically subservient to your will, often harbor their own ambitions and resentments. They are masters of intrigue, of veiled threats and subtle manipulations. You might grant them favors, bestow honors, or even allow them a degree of autonomy. But you know, deep down, that many of them dream of a return to the old republic, or perhaps of placing one of their own on your throne. Then there are the Praetorian Guards, your elite personal bodyguards, the very men sworn to protect you. These soldiers, handsomely paid and housed in their barracks just outside Rome, are a double-edged sword. Their loyalty is crucial, but their power is immense. They can make an emperor, and they can certainly unmake one. Many emperors have learned this the hard way, finding their last moments punctuated by the glint of a praetorian blade. You might try to consolidate your power, to weed out potential threats, but even that is a perilous endeavor. Every execution, every exile, every dismissal creates new enemies, new resentments. The families of those you've purged will harbor grudges, waiting for their moment to strike. It's a vicious cycle, a self-fulfilling prophecy of violence. The more secure you try to make yourself, the more insecure you actually become. You find yourself isolated, surrounded by a court of sycophants and potential traitors. Trust becomes an almost impossible commodity to find. You might confide in a general, only to discover later that he's been secretly meeting with disgruntled senators. You might share a private moment with a favored freedman, only to realize he's been paid to report your every word to your rivals. The weight of this constant suspicion is crushing. Think about the sheer number of Roman emperors who met violent ends. It's not a small percentage. It's a significant, undeniable trend throughout imperial history. From the very first emperor, Augustus, who carefully crafted an image of peace and stability, to the chaotic reigns of the later empire, the threat of assassination was ever present. Some emperors, like Caligula or Nero, were so tyrannical and erratic that their deaths seemed almost inevitable. Others, seemingly benevolent and capable, were struck down by opportunistic rivals or disgruntled factions. The method of assassination varied too, from the brutal simplicity of a sword in the back to the insidious elegance of poison slipped into your wine. You learn to be wary of every gesture, every offering, every unexpected gift. One particularly fascinating and terrifying aspect of imperial assassinations is how often they were carried out by those closest to the emperor. It wasn't always a barbarian plotting from afar or a distant rival general. More often than not, it was a member of your own inner circle. Your wife, your son, your trusted advisors, your personal guards. These were the hands most likely to deliver the fatal blow. The motives were varied ambition, jealousy, fear, or perhaps a desperate belief that your removal was for the good of the empire. This proximity of threat is what makes the Roman imperial experience so uniquely horrifying. You couldn't simply build taller walls or hire more guards. The danger was already inside, sleeping in the next room, or sitting across from you at dinner. The very concept of the Principate, the system of imperial rule, was inherently unstable when it came to succession. There was no clear, universally accepted mechanism for transferring power. This lack of a defined system created a perpetual state of anxiety and competition. When an emperor died, whether naturally or by design, it often triggered a brutal scramble for power. Generals would declare themselves emperor. The Praetorian Guard would auction off the throne to the highest bidder, and senators would back their preferred candidates. This chaos only amplified the temptation to remove an emperor who was deemed weak, unpopular, or simply inconvenient. Why wait for nature to take its course when a well-placed dagger could speed things along and open the path to your own ambition? This constant uncertainty about succession meant that even during periods of relative peace, the threat of an emperor's violent end simmered just beneath the surface. You, as emperor, are acutely aware of this historical precedent, this pattern of violence that has claimed so many before you. It's not just a possibility, it's a probability. For example, take the curious case of Emperor Commodus. Now, this guy really epitomizes the tyrannical lunatic stereotype. He was obsessed with gladiatorial combat, even fighting in the arena himself, much to the disgust of the Roman elite. He fancied himself Hercules and dressed in lion skins. His reign was a descent into bizarre self-indulgence and paranoia. Now, while many emperors were paranoid because they were in danger, Commodus seemed to invite it. His assassination, eventually, was almost a relief to many. He was first given poisoned beef, which he vomited up, and then strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus. It was a messy, desperate affair. This incident highlights a common historical debate. Historians still debate whether Commodus's bizarre behavior was the cause or the effect of the intense pressure and paranoia inherent in being a Roman emperor. Was he truly mad? Or did the constant threat of assassination drive him to madness? You, as an emperor, might find yourself pondering this very question, wondering if your own grip on reality is slowly slipping under the relentless pressure. You might try to be a good emperor, a just ruler, to win the hearts and minds of your people and secure your position. You might embark on grand building projects, enact popular reforms, or lead your legions to victory. But even these benevolent actions can backfire. A successful campaign might make a general too popular, too powerful, turning him into a rival. A popular reform might upset a vested interest, creating powerful enemies in the Senate or among the wealthy elite. There's no safe path, no guaranteed strategy for survival. You are always navigating a minefield, and one wrong step, one misjudged alliance, one whispered rumor can lead to your downfall. One little-known fact about imperial assassinations is the meticulous planning that often went into them. These weren't always spontaneous acts of violence. Sometimes, they involved networks of conspirators, careful timing, and even diversionary tactics. For instance, the assassination of Emperor Gaius, better known as Caligula, was a highly organized affair involving members of the Praetorian Guard and disgruntled senators. They ambushed him in a cryptoporticus, a covered passageway, ensuring he couldn't escape. The very intimacy of these plots, involving people who had regular access to the emperor, is what made them so terrifyingly effective. You might have the best intelligence network in the world, but how do you guard against the man who brings you your morning cloak, or the woman who prepares your bath? The psychological toll of living under such constant threat must have been immense. Imagine the sleepless nights, the jolt of every unexpected sound, the hypervigilance required to simply get through the day. You would find yourself trusting fewer and fewer people, retreating into an ever smaller circle of supposed confidants. But even then, the suspicion would linger. The very act of exercising your imperial power, of making decisions that affected millions, would be intertwined with the grim knowledge that any decision, no matter how carefully considered, could be the one that seals your fate. The crown you wear is not just a symbol of power, it's a target. And in the bloody annals of Roman history, it was a target hit far too often. You're constantly reminded that the very air in the Senate House seems to hum with a subtle tension, a barely perceptible current of ambition and resentment. It's not the open, raucous debates you might expect from a modern legislative body. No, this is Roman politics, a far more dangerous game played with veiled words and intricate social dances. You, the emperor, sit on your elevated seat, observing the venerable senators, men of ancient lineage and immense wealth. They bow low. They offer flowery speeches of loyalty. They vote exactly as you expect them to on public matters. But beneath this veneer of deference, you sense the whispers, the unspoken thoughts, the intricate webs of alliances and rivalries forming just out of your direct sight. Even in the hallowed halls of power, the shadows of conspiracy lengthen. And trust, you quickly realize, becomes a luxury you can ill afford. It's like being in a room full of polite, well-dressed cobras, all of them smiling. You find yourself dissecting every gesture, every intonation. When a senator speaks, are his eyes truly meeting yours? Or are they subtly darting to a colleague, seeking a silent affirmation? When they praise your wisdom, is it genuine admiration? Or a calculated attempt to lull you into a false sense of security? The weight of this scrutiny is exhausting. You can't afford to be wrong. A misjudgment about a senator's true intentions could cost you not just political capital, but your life. The Senate, while stripped of much of its direct power by the emperors, still retained immense moral authority and, critically, social influence. They could stir up public opinion, subtly undermine your decrees, and most dangerously, provide a legitimate front for a conspiracy. After all, if the Senate declared you a tyrant, an enemy of the state, it provided a powerful justification for your removal. Consider the intricate dance of Roman senatorial politics. These men were born into a system that valued prestige, public service at least in theory, and the accumulation of dignitas, a kind of social standing and respect. For centuries, they had ruled Rome as a republic, sharing power among themselves. The rise of the emperors had fundamentally altered this dynamic, turning them from rulers into advisors, from commanders into courtiers. Many still harbored deep-seated republican sentiments, even if they dared not voice them openly. They viewed the emperor as a necessary evil, perhaps, but an evil that could, and often should, be managed, manipulated, or, if necessary, eliminated. You are, in their eyes, just another man, albeit one with immense power, and if you overstep, if you become too autocratic, too unpredictable, or too weak, they will begin to plot. You might try to appease the Senate. You could grant them more responsibilities, allow them greater say in provincial administration, or even simply flood them with honors and public spectacles. Emperor Augustus, for instance, was a master of this, carefully constructing the illusion that the republic still functioned, even as he consolidated all real power in his own hands. He understood that to maintain peace, he needed to make the powerful senatorial families feel respected and included. But even Augustus, with all his cunning, faced conspiracies. The more autonomy you grant, the more leverage they gain. The less you grant, the more resentful they become. It's a no-win scenario, a constant tightrope walk where one wrong step leads to a very sharp drop. And it's not just about direct challenges to your authority. The Senate is a breeding ground for factions, for rivalries between prominent families, and for backroom deals. A powerful senator might align with a disgruntled general, or a wealthy equestrian, creating a network of influence that could be turned against you. Your own advisors, drawn from the senatorial class, might be secretly feeding information to your rivals, or subtly swaying your decisions to benefit their own agenda. You have to maintain an elaborate network of spies and informants, listening in on private conversations, reading intercepted letters, trying to piece together the fragments of dissent before they coalesce into a full-blown plot. It's like trying to listen to every conversation in a massive, crowded banquet hall, knowing that one of those hushed voices is planning your demise. Think about the conspiracy against Julius Caesar. Even before the official start of the Roman Empire, while not an emperor, Caesar held unparalleled power, and his assassination by a group of senators, including his supposed friends Brutus and Cassius, serves as a chilling precedent for every emperor who followed. These men, driven by a complex mix of republican ideals, personal grievances, and fear of Caesar's unchecked ambition, believed they were saving Rome from tyranny. The audacity of their act, striking down the most powerful man in the world in the very Senate House, sent a clear message no one was safe, not even the man who held all the cards. You, as emperor, are acutely aware of this historical event. A constant reminder that even the most powerful can be brought down by a determined group of elites who feel their status or ideals are threatened. One of the subtle yet potent weapons of the Senate was the power of rumor and innuendo. They didn't always need to resort to daggers. They could destroy an emperor's reputation, erode public trust, and subtly turn the masses against him. Whispers of corruption, accusations of debauchery, or hints of impiety could spread like wildfire through Rome, undermining your authority and making you vulnerable. It was a war of perceptions, fought in the bathhouses, the taverns, and the private villas of the wealthy. You might spend fortunes on public games and lavish feasts to win popular favor, only to find your efforts undone by a well-placed rumor planted by a disgruntled senator. It's a truly insidious form of attack, hard to pin down, even harder to fight against. A common historical fact is that many emperors tried to co-opt the Senate. either by showering them with honors and positions, or by filling the Senate with their own loyalists. This strategy had mixed success. While it could create a more compliant body, it often fueled resentment among the old aristocratic families who felt their traditional rights and influence were being eroded. And even your hand-picked loyalists could turn against you if they saw a better opportunity or felt their own ambitions were being stifled. The human element, the raw ambition and self-interest, always proved to be a wild card. Consider the Emperor Tiberius, who famously retreated to the island of Capri for the latter part of his reign, leaving the day-to-day administration of Rome largely to Sejanus, the ambitious prefect of the Praetorian Guard. While Tiberius's reasons for this retreat are debated, one could easily imagine it was, in part, a psychological escape from the constant stifling paranoia of Rome. He was, in a sense, trying to remove himself from the immediate threat of senatorial intrigue. But even from Capri, he couldn't escape. Sejanus, his supposed loyal deputy, began to plot against him, forging alliances and consolidating power in Rome. This highlights an often overlooked detail: the threat could be just as potent when you were absent from the capital, as it was when you were present. The Senate might act more boldly if they felt the emperor's hand was distant. Historians still debate whether the Senate's influence on imperial assassinations was primarily through direct conspiracy or by creating an atmosphere of legitimacy for usurpers and plotters. Did they actively plan every assassination? Or did they simply provide the intellectual and moral framework that justified such acts when they occurred? Regardless, their presence as a powerful, often discontented, body was a constant variable in the dangerous equation of imperial survival. You, as emperor, understand this implicitly. You understand that while the Senate might not always wield the dagger themselves, they often sharpen it and point the way. You find yourself employing a combination of carrot and stick. You might invite certain senators to intimate dinners, seeking to charm them, to glean information, to gauge their loyalties. At the same time, your agents are compiling dossiers on others, noting their debts, their illicit affairs, their weaknesses, anything that could be used as leverage. This constant manipulation, this perpetual game of chess, is mentally taxing. It forces you to always be on guard, to always be performing, to never truly relax. The Senate, for all its supposed diminished power, remains a formidable psychological adversary, a constant source of anxiety and a potential harbinger of your violent demise. You learn to listen not just to what they say, but to what they don't say, to the silences that often speak louder than any words. The hum of their polite conversation is, to your ears, often indistinguishable from the faint, cold whisper of a sharpening blade. You walk the polished marble floors of your palace, the soft sounds of your silken robes rustling with each step. Everywhere you turn, you see them, the Praetorian Guard. Their bronze cuirasses gleam under the lamplight, their helmets severe, their eyes unreadable behind the visors. They are always there, a constant, imposing presence. They are your shield, your personal legion, the very men sworn by sacred oath to protect your imperial person. Yet, as you gaze upon their stoic faces, a chill works its way down your spine, for you know, deep in your gut, that these are also the very men who could, and often do, turn their formidable might against you. The elite guard, your supposed protectors, hold a terrifying dual loyalty, capable of both safeguarding and slaughtering. It's like sleeping with a pack of highly trained, incredibly dangerous wolves in your bedroom, hoping they're on your side. The Praetorian Guard, established by Emperor Augustus as his personal bodyguard, quickly evolved into something far more powerful than a simple security detail. Stationed in their permanent barracks just outside the city, they were a ready, disciplined, and often incredibly influential military force right on Rome's doorstep. Unlike the legions scattered across the vast empire, the Praetorians were intimately involved in the politics of the capital. They saw the comings and goings, heard the whispers, and were constantly aware of the intrigues unfolding within the imperial court. This proximity to power, combined with their privileged status and superior pay, made them a force to be reckoned with, and a constant source of both security and extreme danger for any emperor. You might try to cultivate their loyalty through lavish donatives, generous cash payments given upon your accession or at other significant moments. This was a common and often necessary practice. When you first took the throne, you likely had to pay them a hefty sum, essentially buying their initial allegiance. But these payments were a double-edged sword. While they might secure temporary loyalty, they also taught the Praetorians that their support had a price. And if another claimant or ambitious general offered a higher price, your life could quickly become forfeit. You are, in essence, constantly bidding for your own survival. The Praetorian Prefect, the commander of the guard, is perhaps the most dangerous man in the empire, second only to you. This individual holds direct command over thousands of Rome's most formidable soldiers, men who live and breathe loyalty to their immediate commander. You handpick this prefect with extreme care, trying to find someone utterly loyal, someone you believe you can trust implicitly. But history is littered with examples of Praetorian prefects who, seeing their own immense power, decided to use it to seize the purple for themselves. Sejanus, under Tiberius, is the quintessential example. He systematically accumulated power, eliminating rivals and manipulating the emperor from afar, until his own grand ambition became undeniable. His downfall was dramatic, but a constant reminder of the inherent risk. You live in a state of perpetual vigilance regarding your Praetorian prefect. Do you promote him too quickly, giving him too much authority? Or do you keep him on a tight leash, risking his resentment? Do you trust him with your secrets, or do you keep him at arm's length? Every interaction is a careful calculation. You might surround yourself with multiple prefects, dividing their power, hoping to prevent any single one from becoming too dangerous. But even this strategy has its flaws, as it can lead to internal rivalries within the guard that could spill over into chaos. Consider the events of 41 AD and the assassination of Emperor Caligula. This was a direct, brutal act orchestrated by disgruntled members of the Praetorian Guard, specifically by Cassius Chaerea, a tribune who had been repeatedly mocked and humiliated by Caligula. This wasn't some grand senatorial plot, it was a visceral reaction from men who felt personally offended and, perhaps, genuinely feared for their lives under an increasingly erratic tyrant. After killing Caligula, the Praetorians then found Claudius, Caligula's uncle, hiding behind a curtain, terrified. They dragged him out and, astonishingly, proclaimed him emperor. This moment vividly illustrates their power. They didn't just assassinate an emperor, they made a new one, virtually on the spot, bypassing the Senate entirely. You, as emperor, can never forget that incident. It's the ultimate cautionary tale. The Praetorians weren't just a force in Rome. They were often kingmakers. They had the ability to quickly install or depose an emperor, without waiting for the slow machinations of the Senate or the distant marches of legions from the frontiers. This immediate, decisive power made them utterly unique and undeniably dangerous. When an emperor died, whether naturally or by assassination, the Praetorians often controlled the immediate aftermath. They could demand huge sums from the new claimant, essentially holding the throne for ransom. This created a culture where the guard felt entitled to influence imperial succession, seeing themselves not just as protectors, but as active participants in the highest echelons of Roman politics. A common historical fact is that the Praetorians often acted on their own initiative or were swayed by the highest bidder during moments of imperial instability. The year of the four emperors, 69 AD, is a prime example. After Nero's suicide, the Praetorians played a crucial role in the rise and fall of several emperors, demonstrating their capacity to make and break reigns with frightening speed. Their barracks became a kind of auction house for the imperial throne, where various contenders would promise immense wealth for their support. This was not the dignified transfer of power Rome liked to pretend it had. It was naked. Brutal military might dictating who ruled. One fascinating and somewhat unsettling detail about the Praetorians is their distinct appearance. Unlike the regular legionaries who wore simpler, more practical armor, the Praetorians often had highly decorated equipment, distinguishing them as the elite. They wore a special uniform with unique insignia, setting them apart and fostering a powerful sense of esprit de corps. This distinct identity, however, also meant they saw themselves as separate and superior to the rest of the Roman army, further contributing to their sense of entitlement and willingness to act independently of, or even against, the emperor if they felt it necessary. It was a visible reminder of their elevated status and dangerous autonomy. Historians still debate the extent to which Praetorian assassinations were motivated by genuine grievances against a tyrannical emperor versus purely mercenary desires for donatives and personal gain. Was it a principled stand against tyranny, or simply a calculated financial decision? You, as emperor, understand it's likely a mix of both. You know that even if you rule justly and wisely, the allure of a massive donative from a desperate rival could turn your most trusted guardsmen against you. The gold coins in their hands often weighed heavier than any oath. You might try to rotate their commanders frequently, preventing any one prefect from building too strong a personal following within the guard. Or you might attempt to scatter some of their units across Italy, diluting their concentration of power in Rome. But these are temporary solutions, often met with resentment by the guardsmen who value their prestige and proximity to the capital. The Praetorians are a necessary evil. You need them for protection, but they are also your biggest vulnerability. Every time you pass a patrol, you offer a polite nod, a small smile, and you hope, truly hope, that tonight they remain on your side. The glint of their polished spears is a constant, shimmering reminder of your precarious existence. The imperial dinner table is a spectacle of opulence. Platters piled high with exotic fruits, roasted meats, and delicate pastries stretch before you. Fine Falernian wine, shimmering ruby red in ornate goblets, is poured by silent, attentive slaves. The air is thick with the scent of spices and perfumes. Yet, as you sit at the head of this lavish spread, surrounded by your courtiers and family, a gnawing suspicion taints every morsel, every sip. The simplest acts, like sharing a meal, become fraught with peril as you navigate a world of hidden enemies and deadly concoctions. You find yourself watching your food and drink with a level of paranoia that would make a modern-day food critic seem utterly relaxed. Poison was an insidious and frequently employed weapon in the Roman world, particularly in the cutthroat environment of the imperial court. Unlike a sudden knife attack, which was messy and often required close proximity, poison allowed for a more subtle, less traceable elimination. It could be administered by a trusted servant, slipped into a drink during a banquet, or even introduced into food prepared in the imperial kitchens. The perpetrator could be long gone, or even sitting at the same table as you. By the time the effects took hold, this makes it a particularly terrifying threat, as it's often impossible to guard against without total isolation, which is not an option for an emperor. You might have a praegustator, a food taster, whose unenviable job it is to sample every dish and drink before it reaches your lips. This practice, while providing a thin veneer of safety, is far from foolproof. Poisons could be slow-acting, designed to mimic natural illness, or so potent that even a small taste could be fatal to the taster, giving you little time to react. You watch the praegustator's face intently, searching for any flicker of discomfort, any sign of distress. Every cough, every sigh they make becomes a source of intense anxiety for you. And what if the praegustator himself is compromised? An agent of your enemies, secretly immune to the specific poison or willing to sacrifice himself for a greater cause? The very solution to your problem becomes another layer of potential deceit. The Roman world was surprisingly sophisticated when it came to poisons. While crude plant-based toxins like hemlock were known, there were also more refined and subtle concoctions. Arsenic, for instance, could be disguised in food and would cause symptoms similar to common illnesses, making diagnosis difficult in an age without advanced medical science. There were even rumors of poisons that could be administered in precise doses to cause death days or weeks later, making it almost impossible to link the death back to a specific meal or person. This level of chemical cunning only amplified the constant fear. Think about the notorious Agrippina the Younger, mother of Emperor Nero. She was widely believed to have used poison to eliminate rivals and consolidate her own power, culminating in the alleged poisoning of her husband, Emperor Claudius. The story goes that she administered a mushroom tainted with poison. While the exact details are debated, the sheer prevalence of such accusations underscores the common perception and genuine fear of poison as an imperial weapon. Claudius, despite his intelligence, was a man of simple tastes and trusted his household, a fatal mistake in a court like Rome's. This is a powerful historical example you would certainly be aware of as emperor. A constant reminder that even family members could be deadly. You find yourself instinctively scrutinizing the behavior of those around you during meals. Does your wife offer you a specific dish a little too eagerly? Does a senator insist you try a particular vintage of wine? The casual intimacy of dining becomes a tense interrogation. You might even find yourself picking at your food, unable to fully enjoy the lavish spread, because the underlying fear of a lethal ingredient is always present. The luxury of the Roman imperial table is overshadowed by the chilling possibility of sudden, agonizing death. A common historical fact is that many prominent Romans, not just emperors, employed personal doctors or poison experts, often slaves or freedmen whose skills lay in both identifying poisons and, conversely, concocting them or even developing antidotes. This created a secret, shadowy world of chemical warfare at the highest levels of Roman society. You, as emperor, would likely have access to such experts. But even then, how do you truly trust their loyalty? What if their allegiance shifts, or they are blackmailed by your enemies? The knowledge itself becomes a double-edged sword. One particularly grim detail is the Roman obsession with aqua tofana, a legendary poison, though perhaps more myth than reality, that was said to be colorless, tasteless, and to cause death slowly over weeks or months. Mimicking natural illness, whether it truly existed as described or was simply a powerful urban legend. The fear of such an undetectable, slow-acting killer was palpable. It meant that even if you survived a meal, you couldn't be sure you were out of danger. A lingering illness, a sudden weakness. These could all be the insidious work of a subtle poison, setting in motion a slow, terrifying demise. Historians still debate the true number of Roman emperors who died by poison versus those who succumbed to natural causes that were merely suspected of being poison. The lack of advanced forensics in the ancient world made it easy for suspicion to fall on poison whenever a powerful person died unexpectedly. However, the belief in poison's widespread use was undeniably a powerful force in imperial paranoia. You, as emperor, don't have the luxury of waiting for a coroner's report. Every unexpected illness, every sudden symptom, sends a jolt of terror through you. The trust you can place in your food and drink, in the very sustenance of life, has been utterly poisoned by fear. It's a cruel irony the most powerful man in the world, yet unable to eat or drink without a pervasive sense of dread. The Imperial Palace, a sprawling complex of magnificent villas, manicured gardens, and opulent private chambers, should be your sanctuary. It should be the one place where you can truly relax, unburden yourself from the crushing weight of imperial duties, and find solace among those you hold dearest. Yet, as you navigate its hushed corridors and private courtyards, you are acutely aware that the closest bonds, the most intimate relationships, can become the deadliest. Blood ties offer no true sanctuary when ambition and paranoia infect even the closest members of your imperial household. It's a chilling thought the very people you're supposed to trust unconditionally are often the ones who hold the sharpest knives. Your family is not just a source of personal comfort, they are also crucial players in the game of imperial power. Your wife, your children, your siblings, even distant cousins, all of them possess varying degrees of influence, prestige, and potential claim to the throne. This proximity to power, coupled with the immense stakes involved, can warp even the purest of familial affections into a venomous brew of jealousy, suspicion, and ruthless ambition. Suddenly, your own son, whom you've groomed to be your successor, begins to look less like an heir and more like a rival, impatiently awaiting your demise. Consider the role of the Empress, your wife. She is not merely a consort, she is a powerful figure in her own right, often wielding immense influence behind the scenes. She might have her own political agenda, her own network of allies, and her own ambitions for herself or her children. History is replete with examples of Roman empresses who actively engaged in court intrigue, manipulating their husbands, eliminating rivals, and even plotting the assassinations of those who stood in their way. Livia Drusilla, the formidable wife of Augustus, was famously and perhaps unfairly suspected of poisoning several individuals to secure her son Tiberius's path to the throne. While many of these accusations are difficult to prove definitively, the mere belief in their capacity for such acts underscores the ever-present danger. You might lie next to her in bed, but you can never truly be sure what thoughts are turning in her mind. Then there are your children. Your sons are potential successors, and therefore, potential targets for rivals. Or worse, rivals themselves. The very act of naming an heir can ignite a powder keg of resentment among those who feel overlooked or believe they have a stronger claim. And if you have multiple sons, the competition for your favor, and ultimately for the throne, can become a deadly sibling rivalry, played out with poison and daggers rather than childish squabbles. Brothers might plot against brothers, fueled by the desire for sole power. This is a tragic and recurring theme in imperial history, the very act of procreation, of ensuring the continuity of your line, inadvertently creates the conditions for your own destruction. Your daughters, while not typically direct contenders for the throne, are valuable pawns in the marriage market. Their alliances through marriage can strengthen your position, but also create powerful family blocks that could turn against you. They, too, might be used by ambitious in-laws to gain influence, or even as tools in plots against you. Even your siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins can become threats. A popular general who happens to be your brother could become a rallying point for disgruntled legions. A wealthy aunt with powerful connections could fund a conspiracy. No blood relation is truly beyond suspicion, when the stakes are literally the control of the known world. You might try to control your family, to dictate their marriages, to limit their public appearances, to keep them under constant surveillance. But this only breeds resentment, turning your palace into a gilded cage. The more you try to exert control, the more they might feel stifled, driven to desperate measures. It's a lose-lose situation. Grant them too much freedom, and they might plot. Restrict them too much, and they might still plot, but with greater bitterness. A common historical fact is the concept of adoption in Roman succession. Many emperors adopted their successors, sometimes even adult men who were not blood relatives, to ensure a smooth transition of power and to choose the most competent individual. While this might seem like a practical solution, it often complicated existing family dynamics and sometimes fueled resentment among biological children who felt sidelined. For instance, the assassination of Emperor Commodus, though not directly by a family member, was the culmination of his increasingly tyrannical rule and his alienation of the Senate and even his sister, Lucilla, who was involved in an earlier plot against him. Even if not the direct hand, family members could be instrumental in facilitating a wider conspiracy. One chilling, specific example is the fate of Britannicus, the son of Emperor Claudius. After Claudius married Agrippina the Younger, she skillfully maneuvered her own son, Nero, into position as heir, sidelining Britannicus. Nero, once emperor, saw Britannicus as a direct threat. During a dinner party, Britannicus was allegedly poisoned right at the table. While a food taster was used, the poison was supposedly designed to be initially harmless, then activated by hot water. Britannicus complained of feeling unwell after drinking, then collapsed and died. It was a clear, brutal message. And the perpetrator, Nero, was sitting right there. This kind of cold, calculating family murder is the stuff of nightmares. And it's a reality you, as emperor, would constantly fear. The intimate setting, the shared meal, the knowledge that it's a family member pulling the strings. It's truly horrifying. Historians still debate the true motivations behind many intrafamilial assassinations in the Roman Empire. Were they primarily driven by genuine ambition for power? Or were they often desperate acts of self-preservation in a world where being sidelined often meant eventual death? You, as emperor, can only speculate on the motives of your own family members. Are they plotting against you out of raw ambition, or because they genuinely fear that if they don't strike first, you might eventually eliminate them? This psychological torment, the inability to fully trust even your own blood, is one of the most isolating and terrifying aspects of your imperial existence. The palace, with all its grandeur, becomes a gilded cage, a stage for a deadly family drama. Every embrace feels like a subtle probe for weaknesses. Every shared laugh hides 1,000 unspoken resentments. You find yourself retreating further into yourself, trusting no one absolutely, constantly looking over your shoulder even in the privacy of your own chambers. The warmth of family has been replaced by the cold glint of suspicion, and the soft whispers of love are drowned out by the imagined rustle of conspirators' robes just beyond your door. Beyond the hushed intrigues of the palace and the shadowed whispers of the Senate, a far more blunt and unpredictable force constantly looms your legions. These are the very backbone of the empire, the disciplined, battle-hardened soldiers who guard the frontiers, maintain peace, and ultimately, ensure your rule. You depend on them for everything. But you also know that these legions, scattered across vast distances, can be swayed by charismatic generals, by unmet grievances, or by the intoxicating promise of a new leader. Revolt from the ranks is a terrifying possibility. A situation where the very forces you command can turn against you, fueled by their own desires or the ambition of their commanders. It's like having a loaded sling in your hand, but never quite knowing if the stone is aimed at your enemy or at your own head. The loyalty of the legions is absolutely paramount to your survival. Without their support, your claim to the throne is merely a legal fiction. These professional soldiers, who spent decades of their lives far from Rome, fighting in harsh conditions, developed fierce loyalty to their direct commanders, their generals, who led them to victory and ensured their pay and retirement benefits. This bond between general and legion could be incredibly strong, often eclipsing their abstract loyalty to the distant emperor in Rome. This dynamic creates a constant tension. You need powerful generals to secure the empire. But those same powerful generals, if they command enough loyalty, become potential rivals. You constantly monitor your legions, keeping tabs on their morale, their pay, and, most importantly, the ambitions of their commanders. A victorious general, returning to Rome with the adoration of his troops, is both a triumph and a profound threat. He has proven his military prowess, and his soldiers, fresh from victory, might be tempted to elevate him to the imperial purple. You might grant him a triumph, lavish him with honors, and shower his troops with donatives, all in an attempt to bind his loyalty to you. But these gestures are often just temporary pacifiers. The sheer logistical challenge of maintaining control over legions scattered from Britannia to Egypt is immense. Communications are slow, and rumors spread quickly among soldiers. A charismatic commander can subtly cultivate loyalty, undermining your authority from thousands of miles away. If discontent festers, perhaps due to delayed pay, inadequate supplies, or unpopular orders, a general might seize the opportunity to present himself as a more benevolent or effective leader, sparking a rebellion. This is not a subtle court intrigue. This is open, brutal warfare, where your own professional army turns its swords against you. Consider the Year of the Four Emperors, 69 AD, which you certainly would have studied as a cautionary tale. After Nero's suicide, the empire plunged into a brutal civil war as four different men, all supported by various legions, claimed the throne: Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian. Each rose and fell with terrifying speed, propelled by the loyalty of their armies. This period vividly demonstrated that ultimate power rested not with the Senate, or even the Praetorian Guard, but with the legions on the frontiers. Whoever commanded the most loyal, most effective legions could, and usually did, become emperor, even if only for a brief, bloody reign. You live with the specter of this civil strife, knowing your fate could easily be decided by legions you've never even seen, under commanders you barely know. You try to ensure that no single general becomes too powerful, too beloved by his troops. You might rotate commanders frequently, preventing them from establishing deep personal bonds with their legions. You might split up victorious armies, dispersing their seasoned veterans among different garrisons. You might even, subtly, try to foster rivalries between generals, ensuring they spend more time competing with each other than plotting against you. It's a cynical game, but a necessary one for survival. A common historical fact is that legions often identified themselves strongly with their standards and their specific commanders. They had nicknames, shared battle honors, and a powerful sense of camaraderie. This unit cohesion, so vital for military effectiveness, could also be a dangerous force when turned against the state. If their general declared himself emperor, many legions would follow him out of deep personal loyalty, convinced that he represented their true interests, rather than some distant, abstract emperor in Rome. One particularly fascinating and terrifying detail is the tradition of the Imperial Acclamation. When a general declared himself emperor, his legions would typically acclaim him, raising him on their shields and hailing him as imperator. This symbolic act was crucial, as it legitimized his claim in the eyes of his soldiers and served as a direct challenge to your authority. It was a declaration of war, plain and simple, and it meant that, suddenly, you were not just the emperor, but a combatant fighting for your very survival against your own armed forces. The sound of distant cheers, if they weren't for you, would send shivers down your spine. Historians still debate the true balance between a general's personal ambition and the genuine grievances of the legions as the primary driver of military revolts against Roman emperors. Was it the general seizing an opportunity, or were the soldiers truly fed up and looking for a new leader? You, as emperor, understand it's often both. A dissatisfied legion is fertile ground for an ambitious general, and a popular general can easily whip up discontent among his troops if he sees a chance for power. You spend considerable time and resources on intelligence gathering from the provinces. You have spies embedded within legions, reporting on the mood of the troops, the loyalty of the officers, and any signs of disaffection or burgeoning ambition among your generals. Every dispatch from the frontier is scrutinized, every victory celebrated with a mix of relief and renewed anxiety. You might dispatch imperial agents to deliver your decrees directly, bypassing your general's command structure, just to ensure your message is heard and your authority upheld. The vastness of the empire, which provides its strength, also creates your greatest vulnerability, allowing military challenges to brew far from your immediate reach. You might sleep soundly knowing the barbarians are held at bay, but your dreams are haunted by the image of your own legions, marching not against an external foe, but against your very palace walls. You step out onto the balcony of your palace, gazing down at the bustling heart of Rome. The colossal buildings stretch out before you, a testament to your empire's grandeur. Below, the streets teem with life merchants hawking their wares, citizens rushing to the forum, children playing in the sun. A cacophony of sounds rises to meet you. The shouts of vendors, the creak of carts, the distant roar from the Colosseum. You wave, and a ripple of recognition and cheers spreads through the crowd. This is your power, your public face, the immense popularity that, on some days, feels like your greatest shield. But then, a flicker of a memory, a chilling anecdote, and you realize your fate often hangs on the fickle adoration of the Roman populace, a love that can quickly curdle into murderous hatred. It's like standing on a massive, roaring wave, hoping it carries you to shore and doesn't just smash you against the rocks. The Roman populace, particularly the vast crowds within the city of Rome itself, held a unique and often underestimated power over the emperors. While they didn't have direct political representation in the same way the Senate or the legions did, their collective mood, their cheers, or their angry shouts could significantly influence events. An emperor who lost the support of the Roman mob, who was seen as unpopular, tyrannical, or simply ineffective, became incredibly vulnerable. Their discontent could be exploited by rivals, fuel riots, and, in extreme cases, provide the final push for an assassination. You understand that keeping the Roman populace happy is a critical, continuous task. This is where the famous bread and circuses come into play. You regularly provide vast distributions of free grain, the bread, to ensure no one starves, thus preventing widespread hunger-fueled riots. And you stage spectacular public games, gladiator contests, chariot races, and theatrical performances, the circuses, to entertain the masses and distract them from their daily hardships or any political grievances. The roar of the crowd, whether cheering a gladiator or hailing your name, is a balm to your anxieties, but also a constant reminder of how easily that roar could turn into a bloodthirsty chant against you. You attend these public events, enduring the heat and the noise, showing your face, engaging with the crowds. Your popularity relies on appearing approachable, generous, and strong. You listen to their petitions, even if you never intend to grant them all, and you ensure your public image is carefully managed. Statues of you are erected throughout the city, coins bearing your likeness are minted, and poets sing your praises. It's an elaborate, continuous public relations campaign, because you know that public opinion, though seemingly ephemeral, can be a deadly weapon. Consider the reigns of emperors like Caligula or Nero. Initially, both enjoyed periods of immense popularity with the Roman people. Caligula, known for his lavish games and populist gestures early in his reign, was adored. Nero, too, was beloved by the common people for his artistic pursuits and grand spectacles. However, as their reigns descended into tyranny, extravagance, and increasing paranoia, their popularity waned. The public's adoration turned to resentment, then to fear, and finally to open hatred. This shift in public sentiment created an environment where their assassinations became not just acceptable, but in many eyes, a welcome relief. The mob, who once cheered your name, could just as easily cheer for your downfall. One of the more subtle ways the populace could influence your fate was by their reaction to your public appearances. If you were met with silence, or worse, with jeers during a procession or a visit to the forum, it was a clear signal of your waning power and popularity. Such a public display of disapproval could embolden your enemies in the Senate or the Praetorian Guard, signaling that you were weak and ripe for removal. You pay close attention to the mood of the crowd, the volume of their cheers, and the energy of their applause. A flat reception is a terrifying omen. A common historical fact is that the emperor's connection to the plebs common people was often maintained through various public works projects, building new aqueducts, bathhouses, temples, or even just repairing roads demonstrated your care for the common good and provided employment. These were not just practical improvements, they were tangible symbols of your beneficence, designed to secure popular approval and prevent unrest. You know that a visible commitment to the welfare of the people can buy you time, can build a reservoir of goodwill that might, just might, protect you when things turn sour. One quirky, yet revealing detail about the relationship between the emperor and the Roman public is the significance of the congiarium, a direct cash handout to the people. These occasional distributions of money, alongside the grain dole, were hugely popular and effective tools for buying public favor. They were a direct, personal gift from you to the people, bypassing the bureaucracy and fostering a direct connection. Imagine the scene throngs of excited Romans, queuing for hours, eager for their share of your imperial generosity. It felt good, for a moment, to be loved. But you also knew it was transactional, a temporary bribe against discontent. The gold coins in their hands represented moments of peace bought at a hefty price. Historians still debate the true impact of bread and circuses on the stability of the Roman Empire. Was it a cynical manipulation that prolonged tyrannical rule, or a necessary social welfare program that prevented constant urban unrest? You, as emperor, don't have the luxury of intellectual debate. You simply know that if the grain shipments are delayed, or if the games are canceled, the grumbling starts. And the grumbling quickly turns into something far more dangerous. The image of the cheerful, placid Roman crowd is often a fragile one, and you understand that beneath the surface, a volatile current of resentment and desperation can always be found. You invest heavily in public spectacles, ensuring they are grander, more exciting, and more frequent than those of your predecessors. You understand that the roar of the crowd, the collective gasp at a particularly daring chariot race, or the shared elation of a gladiatorial victory, momentarily binds them to you. But as you watch the sun set over the forum, casting long shadows across the monuments, you know that this adoration is fleeting. It can vanish in a heartbeat, replaced by a chilling silence, or worse, by the hungry roar of a mob demanding your blood. Your reign, in a very real sense, is a daily performance, and the Roman people are your most unpredictable and potentially most deadly audience. The air in your private chambers hangs heavy with unspoken dread. The news has arrived, or perhaps you've simply woken to a new, terrifying reality. Your enemies have prevailed, or your support has simply evaporated. The legions have declared for another. The Senate has condemned you, or the Praetorian Guard has finally shown its true, mercenary colors. The choices laid before you are stark, brutal, and often indistinguishable from one another: exile or elimination. When you fall from grace, the trajectory is swift and horrifyingly clear: a humiliating banishment, a forced retirement that is little more than a living death, or a swift, permanent end. You are no longer the emperor. You are merely a target, a problem to be neatly disposed of. The concept of exile, though seemingly less brutal than assassination, was often a deeply feared fate for a deposed Roman emperor or even a powerful senator. To be stripped of your wealth, your titles, your influence, and sent to a remote, often desolate corner of the empire was a form of social and political death. You would live out your days under constant surveillance, cut off from all meaningful power, a fading memory to the world you once commanded. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a psychological torment, a prolonged public humiliation designed to break your spirit. However, even exile carried its own dangers. A living emperor, even a deposed one, remained a potential rallying point for disgruntled factions, a threat to the new regime. A loyal general might attempt to restore you, or a public yearning for your return might develop. Because of this inherent risk, exile was often a temporary measure, a precursor to a more permanent solution. Many emperors who were exiled quickly met mysterious ends shortly after arriving at their remote destinations, usually at the hands of agents dispatched by the new powers in Rome. Your safe exile might just be a slow walk to your grave. You might attempt to negotiate for your life, offering to abdicate, to withdraw completely from public life, to swear allegiance to the new emperor. But such offers are often met with skepticism. The new ruler, having seized power, is unlikely to leave any loose ends, particularly one as dangerous as a living, breathing former emperor. Your knowledge, your connections, your very existence represent a threat. The new regime wants stability, and stability often demands your complete, undeniable removal from the chessboard. Consider the fate of Emperor Vitellius during the Year of the Four Emperors. After his legions were defeated, and with Rome falling to Vespasian's forces, Vitellius was captured. He was dragged through the streets of Rome, publicly humiliated, subjected to every kind of insult, and then finally executed, his body thrown into the Tiber River. This wasn't a discreet, calculated assassination. It was a brutal, public spectacle, designed to send a clear message: those who fall from power will be utterly annihilated. You are keenly aware of such precedents, understanding that your downfall will likely be both violent and spectacularly public. A warning to anyone who might consider following in your footsteps. The methods of elimination varied, but they were always efficient. A dagger in the bath, a swift strangulation, a forced suicide. These were the common tools of regime change. You would be given little warning, little chance to defend yourself. The very people who served you, who perhaps even claimed to love you just hours before, would turn on you with brutal efficiency, eager to curry favor with the new power, or simply to ensure their own survival. A common historical fact is that the Romans often preferred suicide as a dignified end for defeated leaders, or at least provided the option of it. This allowed the condemned to theoretically maintain some control over their final moments and allowed the new regime to avoid the direct stigma of execution. However, forced suicide was a thinly veiled euphemism for execution, where you were given the choice between a swift, self-inflicted death or a far more gruesome, public execution. Seneca, the philosopher, famously committed suicide on Nero's orders, meticulously carrying out the ritual as blood drained from his veins. You would know that if this choice was offered to you, it was no choice at all. One grim, rarely discussed detail about these eliminations is the aftermath. The bodies of deposed emperors were often subjected to further indignities. They might be dragged through the streets, dismembered, or thrown into the Tiber. This wasn't just vengeance. It was a powerful symbolic act. It desecrated the imperial person, utterly stripping away their divine aura and sending a chilling message that the former godlike ruler was now nothing more than refuse. It was a complete annihilation, physical and symbolic. Historians still debate the extent to which defeated emperors were given a genuine choice in their fate, or if offers of exile or suicide were merely cynical ploys to make their removal appear more palatable to the Roman public and elite. You, as emperor, would understand that once the tide has turned against you, once your legions have abandoned you, once the Praetorian Guard has betrayed you, there is no real choice left. The end is inevitable. Only the precise method remains uncertain. You realize, with a crushing finality, that your carefully constructed world has crumbled. The power that defined your existence has vanished, replaced by a profound vulnerability. The palace, once a symbol of your might, becomes a trap. Every face you see, every shadow that falls across the wall, seems to carry the grim intention of your executioners. Your last moments, you realize, will likely be filled not with grand pronouncements, but with the cold, hard reality of a blade, or the slow, creeping numbness of poison. The only certainty, once you've fallen, is that the grand stage of the Roman Empire will quickly move on, leaving your tragic end to become just another cautionary tale whispered in the hallowed halls of power. As you stand on the Palatine Hill, surveying the sprawling city that kneels before you, your thoughts inevitably turn to the future. Your own mortality, a constant, chilling companion throughout your reign. now takes on a new, urgent significance. You are getting older. Or perhaps the threats have simply become too numerous to ignore. You must consider your legacy. And more importantly, the continuity of the empire. This brings you to the perilous act of succession. The act of choosing an heir is a dangerous gamble, often paving the way for the very conflicts you sought to avoid. It's like throwing a single, precious coin into a roaring cascade, hoping it lands right side up and doesn't just get swallowed by the rapids. The problem with Roman imperial succession was its inherent lack of a formal, universally accepted system. Unlike a clear dynastic monarchy where the eldest son automatically inherits, the Roman principate was, in theory, a meritocracy where the most capable man should rule. In practice, this meant a confusing and often violent mix of adoption, natural birth, military acclamation, and senatorial approval. This ambiguity created a constant power vacuum upon an emperor's death, an open invitation for ambitious generals, powerful senators, and even your own family members to stake their claim. Your attempt to bring order to this chaos often just creates a more focused target for those who seek your demise. You might choose to adopt a successor, a common practice favored by some of the good emperors like Trajan and Hadrian, who adopted talented individuals rather than relying solely on bloodlines. This strategy aimed to secure the most competent ruler, theoretically ensuring stability. However, even adoption could lead to deadly rivalries. If you adopted an adult general, your biological son might feel usurped, leading to resentment and potential plots. If you adopted a younger man and trained him, he might become impatient, or others might conspire with him to hasten your demise. The very act of naming him as heir immediately turns him into a target, and you along with him, as those who oppose his succession might try to remove both of you. Alternatively, you might choose to rely on your biological son, hoping to establish a stable dynasty. This seems natural, a continuation of your own bloodline. But this, too, is fraught with peril. Your son might be weak, incompetent, or simply unsuited for the immense pressures of imperial rule. Or, perhaps more dangerously, he might be too ambitious, too eager to seize the reins of power. The historical record is littered with instances of sons conspiring against their fathers, brothers against brothers, all in the desperate scramble for the imperial purple. You watch your own children with a mixture of love and gnawing suspicion, wondering if one of them will be the one to betray you. The selection of an heir immediately creates a new focal point for imperial politics. Those who support your chosen successor will rally around him, forming new alliances. But those who oppose him, who believe they have a stronger claim, or who simply dislike your choice, will begin to conspire. The transition period, the time between your official designation of an heir and your actual death, is incredibly dangerous. It's a period of heightened tension, where both you and your chosen successor are vulnerable. You, because you are seen as an obstacle to the immediate ascension of the heir, and the heir, because he is seen as an obstacle to anyone else's ambition. Consider the events surrounding the death of Emperor Marcus Aurelius and the succession of his son, Commodus Marcus Aurelius, often lauded as one of the philosopher emperors, chose his biological son. While there's no direct evidence Marcus Aurelius was assassinated to pave the way for Commodus, the stark contrast between the wise father and the tyrannical son highlights the inherent risk of dynastic succession when the chosen heir is unfit. Commodus's reign was plagued by paranoia and tyranny, leading directly to his own assassination. You, as emperor, would dread such an outcome, knowing that a poor choice in succession could undo all your life's work and plunge the empire into chaos. You try to prepare your chosen successor, to teach them the intricacies of governance, the art of command, the delicate balance of power. You involve them in imperial administration, send them on military campaigns, give them public roles. But this very exposure, this gradual sharing of power, only makes them more visible. more of a target, and ironically, more of a potential threat to you. The longer you live after designating your heir, the greater the impatience might grow, both within your successor and among their supporters. A common historical fact is that many emperors who reigned for a long time often faced increasing challenges regarding their succession, as their chosen heirs grew older and more impatient, or as new potential rivals emerged. The passage of time itself becomes a threat. New generations of senators and generals might rise who have no personal loyalty to you, only to your designated successor, or to someone else entirely. One fascinating, and often overlooked, aspect of succession is the role of the imperial court and public opinion in the heir's perception. If your chosen successor is unpopular with the praetorians, or despised by the Senate, their path to the throne will be incredibly rocky, even if you've personally endorsed them. The whisper campaigns against your heir, highlighting their perceived weaknesses or vices, can be just as damaging as any direct plot. You have to constantly manage not just the reality of your successor's abilities, but also their public image and the perception of their strength. Historians still debate whether the Roman imperial system would have been more stable with a clear, established rule of succession, like primogeniture, or if the flexibility of adoption, despite its risks, allowed for the occasional selection of truly capable rulers. You, as emperor, are caught in this very dilemma. Do you prioritize a strong bloodline and risk an incompetent heir? Or do you choose the most capable man and risk alienating your family and sparking a succession crisis? The very act of making this choice, of attempting to impose order on the unpredictable forces of ambition and power, is itself a gamble that could, and often does, lead to your own violent end. The future of the empire, and your own life, hangs precariously on the fate of your chosen heir. You stand now in the twilight of your imagined reign, the weight of centuries of Roman imperial history pressing down upon you. You've walked the palace halls, navigated the treacherous Senate, felt the double-edged loyalty of the Praetorian Guard, tasted the fear of poisoned banquets, watched your own family with suspicion, and lived under the constant shadow of legionary revolt and a fickle populace. You've tried to choose an heir, only to realize that even that act is a gamble with your own life. The chilling legacy of Roman assassinations, a tapestry woven with ambition, betrayal, and sudden death, continues to resonate through the ages, reminding us of the profound fragility of even the greatest power. It's a whisper from the past, echoing warnings that still feel eerily relevant today. The echoes of these ancient plots and betrayals don't just exist in dusty history books. They reveal fundamental truths about power, human nature, and the corrupting influence of absolute authority. The Roman imperial system, for all its unparalleled strength and longevity, was inherently unstable at its very core when it came to the transfer of power. Without a clear, undisputed line of succession, every emperor's death, whether natural or forced, became a potential flashpoint, a moment of acute vulnerability for the entire empire. This constant uncertainty fueled a culture of conspiracy and preemptive violence. Why wait for your rival to strike when you could strike first? Why accept the current emperor when you could be the one on the throne? Consider how these assassinations shaped the very nature of imperial rule. Emperors learned, often tragically, that they could not afford to be weak, naive, or overly trusting. They had to be cunning, ruthless, and perpetually suspicious. This environment, while perhaps necessary for immediate survival, often led to paranoia, tyranny, and a further erosion of any ethical boundaries. The very act of clinging to power in such a volatile system demanded a certain kind of personality, one hardened by constant threat. It's no wonder that so many emperors became despots. The alternative was often a swift, violent end. The stories of these fallen emperors serve as a stark reminder that power, no matter how absolute, is never truly secure. The Roman emperor, though worshipped as a god, clothed in purple, and commanding vast armies, was still a man. vulnerable to a blade in the back, a drop of poison, or the shifting tides of loyalty. Their deaths weren't just personal tragedies. They were often seismic events that sent ripples of instability throughout the vast empire, leading to civil wars, economic disruption, and periods of intense anxiety for ordinary citizens. The price of imperial ambition was often paid by millions. Think about the psychological toll this constant threat must have taken. Imagine living every day knowing that your closest advisors, your personal guards, even your own family, could be plotting your demise. Every meal is a risk. Every public appearance a gamble. Sleep offers little respite, as nightmares of daggers and poison likely plague your mind. The grandeur of the palace becomes a prison, and the isolation of ultimate power becomes a crushing burden. It's a loneliness unique to those at the very top, a terrifying solitude born of absolute mistrust. One profound aspect of this chilling reality is the way it forced emperors to become masters of political maneuvering, deception, and intimidation. They couldn't simply rule by decree. They had to constantly manage a complex web of relationships, balancing the demands of the Senate, the Praetorian Guard, the legions, and the populace. This intricate, deadly dance consumed their lives, leaving little room for genuine reform or benevolent governance. Survival itself became the primary objective, overshadowing all other considerations. A common historical fact is that the average reign length of a Roman emperor, especially during certain tumultuous periods, was remarkably short due to the high incidence of violent deaths. This rapid turnover created a sense of perpetual crisis, making long-term planning difficult and contributing to overall instability. The throne was a revolving door, and few who stepped through it emerged unscathed. One particularly poignant detail, often overlooked, is how the constant threat of assassination likely affected the personal relationships of emperors. How do you maintain a loving relationship with your spouse when she might be plotting your demise? How do you raise children when they could be your greatest threat? The emotional cost of being a Roman emperor, beyond the physical dangers, must have been immense, stripping away the very fabric of normal human connection. It's a life lived in a gilded cage of suspicion. Historians still debate the extent to which the Roman Empire's unique succession problems contributed to its eventual decline, versus other factors like economic pressures or external invasions. However, there's little doubt that the internal strife caused by constant imperial assassinations significantly weakened the state from within, diverting resources and attention from its true challenges. You, having now experienced this grim reality firsthand, understand that the rot often started at the very top, in the heart of the imperial palace. The echoes of these ancient betrayals serve as a timeless cautionary tale. They remind us that power, unchecked and unconstrained, can be the most dangerous force of all, not just to those it subjugates, but to those who wield it. The Roman emperors, for all their might, were ultimately trapped in a system of their own making, a deadly game where the ultimate prize was often a swift and brutal end.